interesting things about teaching Skype lessons is that you teach people from all around the world. I've got some students from Japan, I've got a student from India, from America, and from Holland as well as students from England. And what's interesting is that one of the questions that I get is, how do you play jazz music? How do you actually play jazz music? And you know, these questions, they do pop up on a regular basis, not just from people who want to study jazz music, but from people who are also studying pop music or classical music as well. And they come to me and they ask, you know, these questions: how do you play, or how do you approach playing jazz music? And so I kind of have this this theory behind it. So I'm going to explain this theory to you now, and it doesn't actually involve me playing the saxophone. And so imagine you're learning a language, because that's what jazz music is. Jazz music is learning a language, right? So, you know, when you learn a language, you learn words, and you put these words into an order to form the syntax, and you then create sentences, and these sentences can become paragraphs, and then you can tell a story. You know, it's very similar to how Lester Young described soloing, you know, telling a story in your solo. And so when we learn a language, we learn the words bit by bit, you know, consider them as cells, and then we put those words in a particular order, but at the same time we learn the pronunciation of the words as well, and the dialect perhaps of where this language comes from, you know. For instance, if you're learning French, you know, you learn the articulation of the words. Or if you're learning German or Dutch, for instance, you learn the articulation, the right pronunciation of the letters that form the words. So it's kind of similar to that whole process. Whereas jazz music, what we do is we are learning fragments, if you like. They're called licks, right? Fragments of people's solos who we're inspired by. We are inspired by the people who we listen to on the CDs. For instance, if you're really into somebody like David Sanborn, you know, we take down his solo, we transcribe his solo, or either that, not perhaps the entire solo, but fragments of his solo, and we take on board these little words, these little fragments, these cellular ideas. And the more we combine together of these ideas, we can string them together eventually to make sentences. And that's just it. We should be hugely influenced by our record collection. We should really be influenced by our record collection, and you know, these key idols that we really aspire to be able to play like. You know, think of it like when you're learning a language, like a foreign language, like French or something like that. We can learn it at home, in our own homeland, and that can be perhaps a little bit more challenging than actually going out to France or to Germany or wherever, and learning the language while you're there. So, I mean, last year I remember I was living in France for a good 4 months, and it was fantastic. And I went out there and I learned a few phrases before I went out there. But while I was out there, I was soaking up all this language, and I was soaking up all these phrases and the correct dialect and pronunciation of the words, and I was learning how to, you know, say things and get around. And it was a lot easier being in that country while soaking up that language. So consider that concept the same as delving yourself into the music that you want to learn, or the players that you want to aspire to sound like. So the more you listen, the more of these albums that you listen to, the more you take on. And I'm talking, when I mean listening to the albums, I mean like taking not just the whole album, listening to it once or twice. Take one tune from that album and listen to it repeatedly. or even that solo. Listen to that solo over and over and over and over again, to the point where you can sing it. You know, if you can sing along with that solo, you're digesting it in your mind, and then because you can sing it, because you've really internalized it, it will be easier for you to pick out these certain phrases that perhaps you like within the entire form of that solo, or either fragments, you know, of within that solo, or perhaps the whole entire solo itself. So the first thing you can do is make a list of your favourite players. It's as simple as that. If you make a tangible list of your favourite players, and you might have loads of favourite players, you might start brainstorming then and go, and you might come up with 10 favourite players. I want to sound like that person, I want to sound like that person, and that person, and that person. And, well, you know, perhaps narrow it down for yourself. You might start off with 10, but perhaps navigate towards the main few that you really like. So if you make a list of these favourite players, they are going to be your study. They are going to be the people that you really are going to home in on and study. So take one of those from the list and basically start transcribing them. Listen, like how I said, listen to the albums over and over again. Listen to the tunes, the one track on that album that you love that solo in, and listen to it over and over again. Listen to that solo on its own and listen to it over and over again. Learn to sing it, and by either taking that solo down from the record, by transcribing it from the record, you can do that, or get a hold of the transcription itself. You know, you can get hold of so many transcriptions nowadays on the internet, or, you know, buy the book, buy the transcription book. And it's interesting because some people say to me, well, you know, isn't that cheating if I buy the book? Well, no. You know, if it's easier for you to actually read somebody's solo than it is to perhaps transcribe orally, just do it. Just do it, because I mean, I've done it that way. I've done it both ways. I mean, when I first started off playing, I was transcribing a lot of Benny Goodman and Stan Getz after that, and some of the West Coast players, but at the same time I was getting myself through the Charlie Parker Omnibook, and so I was reading all those solos. So, you know, either way is absolutely fine, I think. You know, take the Charlie Parker Omnibook, for instance. You know, I was reading through those solos and memorising fragments from that solo, you know, from what I was learning in the Omnibook, and you know, trying to play along with it on the record as well. So, you know, tunes like Coco or Red Cross, or, you know, Confirmation, or things like that. And trying to play along with Charlie Parker playing on at the same time on you know, the record player. But, you know, some people find it easier to do it orally. Some people find it easier to do it by reading. And you're going to read. You know, it's working on your reading at the same time. So that's a good thing. And so when you learn these lines, or if you like, these words to form sentences, or if you take a solo and it's a really long solo, it could go on, you know, some jazz solos, they can go on forever. They can, you know, go on for about 5 minutes, or, you know, loads and loads and loads and loads of music if you're going to do it orally. Think in bite-sized chunks. Don't be overwhelmed by the length and the complexity of some of these solos. You know, think in bite-sized chunks. If you think in bite-sized chunks, you're approaching something in a controlled way, in a slow manner, and you're taking baby steps towards eventually sounding like your hero. So once you've got some lines together, there's 2 ways that I go about doing this. You can completely out of time and completely kind of rubato, in rubato fashion, just start slowly combining these licks and these words together to form sentences. You know, and that's kind of working on your improvisation, so that you're jumping from one idea to the next idea, to the next idea, to the next idea, to the next idea, and then repeat it and repeat it, and you know, you're putting these lines together in a juxtaposed fashion. And you can do that completely out of time, sort of like free fashion, you know, rubato style. And then once you've taken that approach and you kind of know the harmony and the key that you're working in, start applying it over common standards, you know, that have a functional harmony to it. And so then you start practicing tunes, you know, your repertoire, alongside building in this new vocabulary. One of the most important aspects of transcription for me is not just taking down the notes. It really isn't just taking down the notes, because ask yourself the question, why do you like what you're listening to? Why do you like that saxophone player, or why do you like that trumpet player, or why do you like the singer that you're listening to, or that piano player? It's the energy which they're expressing into their playing. It's the energy, and the energy that creates the tone as well. So it's not just about taking down the notes, right? It's not just about taking down the notes. For me, it isn't anyway. It's about trying to emulate the spirit, emulate the feeling, emulate the passion, that heart that is inspiring you to want to play in that way in the first place. So you got the notes down, you got these phrases down, and you're combining sentences, you're combining lines, but don't just stop at that, because otherwise you're just going to sound like somebody who just plays lines, you know, imitates some lines. No. What's going to hit anybody who's going to be listening to you on a gig or on a recording is not just the notes on themselves, it's your spirit, and it's the feeling that you convey through the notes. And so if you're listening to, if you're really into, I don't know, Wayne Shorter, or Jan Garbarek, or Stan Getz, or Benny Carter, Johnny Hodges, any of these guys, you're taking down and you're trying to emulate the energy and the intent that they play with, and try and take that on board. It's a really interesting process, because it unleashes something inside you. It unleashes a spirit inside you that may have already been dormant for so long. And this is one of the great things about transcription that I've found over the years. You know, you embark upon listening to somebody new perhaps, and you think, wow, I really love the way they're playing. It's not just the notes, it's the way they're actually playing, the way they're expressing themselves, and the energy that they're using. That is so important, and I think it's something that you rarely hear about as well.